Hello, everyone, and welcome to the Academy of Community Engagement Scholarship Virtual Coffee Hour. Today, we are delighted to have one of our members, Dr. Rajesh Tandon from India, as our leader, discussant, etc. And got several of his colleagues here, so I'm sure it's going to be a very wonderful discussion. As you can see, even from our title slide, Rajesh is not only the founder but the president of Participatory Research in Asia, as well as the co-chair of an international academy and the UNESCO chair on community-based research and social responsibility in higher education, and much, much more. So with this, I'm going to turn it over to Rajesh.
Thank you, Mary. You can hear me? Okay, great. Well, thank you all. Um, it's wonderful to be able to join this coffee hour. It's always time zones are a bummer, and it's very difficult to catch up when you are in different zones. So, good morning to some of you, good afternoon, and to my colleagues here, good evening. The I am presenting to you a little bit historically what we have been doing, particularly in India, and where the work is positioned today. So, PRIA began as a research and training institute in 1982, and in the early years, we were primarily focused on using lived experience and experiential knowledge and learning in order to empower communities to act in their collective interest. So, in those days, participatory research, which has now completed 50 years, in those days, participatory research was not seen as an academically sanguine, acceptable research. It was seen as primarily participatory action. So Priya began to do this work, and we will share all these slides with Mary, and she can circulate later on. And in the early days of our work, therefore, we looked at participatory research more from the point of view of lived experience, community knowledge, but also as a springboard for action to change situations, to engage with service providers, development actors, public servants based on their own knowledge. So, next slide, please. The work, therefore, primarily in the early days focused on community engagement. And this meaning of community engagement, about 25 years ago, began to enter in the higher education context. And as you would remember, in the early days, community engagement was seen as extension, extramural studies or extension, where universities did research and they did teaching. And for those who were not inside the academia, it was extension. And primarily, the purpose of extension was that the knowledge that exists in academia can be shared in the community. So we began to question that in our work, particularly in the context of India, where many of our communities, indigenous communities, without being inside the academia, also had quite a bit of knowledge. So we began to argue that participatory research methodology draws on the work that communities can contribute to based on their own knowledge. So the mutuality, mutual learning, acceptance of community knowledge, indigenous knowledge, workers' knowledge. So there were many such engagements in the late 90s, early 2000, which were a bit of a contestation when we talk about mutual learning. And in that context, for example, we were doing quite a bit of work after the Bhopal gas disaster, and we were working with workers organizations, farm workers, industrial workers, workers on the construction industry. And the research on occupational health and safety very rarely looked at it from the workers' point of view, their lived experience. And in the early days, till about late 90s, there was no research which confirmed that workers had bicyanosis in textile or silicosis in construction. And after this kind of research and the voice of workers began to push, the researchers engaged in academic institutions began to see this. And I'm very happy to report that some of the first set of workers who were able to seek redressal, including compensation, was only possible when this kind of a research methodology was widely used and used as a way of engaging academic researchers and policymakers. So the logic that we developed in the course of our work, we demonstrated that when communities share and own their knowledge, when they do an analysis of their situation together with experts from outside, they begin to see how their situation can be improved. So when we talk about sustainable change requires that communities themselves own the findings of research and want to do something about it. Otherwise, they may say, well, this is your research finding, nothing to do with us. We don't understand why this is happening. So this kind of a involvement in developing and producing knowledge for change has been an important part of PRIA's work over this period. Now, the our engagement. um, Next slide, please, Anshuman. Our engagement with Indian higher education, and I'm going to primarily focus on that because that gives more concrete examples, began when Professor Bud Hall, who is in University of Victoria in Canada, some of you know him, he's also an ACES veteran, um, and I began to act as UNESCO co-chairs on community-based research and social responsibility in higher education. This began in 2012. And since then, we produced some research at a global level, which was able to demonstrate that body of knowledge in academia is not the only body of knowledge. There are other sources and other bodies of knowledge. They may not be formally recognized or written up, but they exist in reality. So, just to describe what we have been doing of late in the last 10 years with the Indian higher education system. We have, hundreds and thousands of colleges, universities, and nearly 50 million students are enrolled in post-secondary institutions. The community engagement perspective in Indian higher education system began about 10 years ago. And then it got reinforced in 2000 when a new national education policy was drafted. I'm going to share this with you. All these documents you can download, open access later on. I'm not going to do that, but if you want later on for your use. So I was involved, and the reason I got involved, partly because of my status as UNESCO chair, partly because PRIA was already working with various departments and agencies of government in training them on participatory research. And one of the things we did was to say that how can students learn from society? How can they learn from community? How can they learn in interaction with society? And how can they learn by understanding the knowledge and the experiences of communities? So gradually, community engagement became a common practice in some departments, primarily initially in schools of social work, sociology, some departments like gender studies, um, of course, agriculture, nutrition, forestry, and primary healthcare were doing quite a bit of work in this context, but not clearly supported by policy. So the policy came in 2020, as you see in this document, and this fostering social responsibility and community engagement, this is a document which arose from the work we did directly with University Grants Commission in training faculty members so that they can engage their students in the real world and develop their interactive learning. The policy did several other things. First of all, after 2020, the policy asked all disciplines and all faculties to learn from community. In fact, it spread not only to universities but also to technical institutions, engineering, architecture, management. Typically, management engineering institutions would do internship in industry. But after the policy came into being, they are also encouraged to do internship with local communities, with local governments, local municipalities, so that their theoretical knowledge can be exchanged or improved or even shared with local communities. So the focus of community engagement shifted not as specific departments, but institution as a whole, all disciplines. And this, these are the principles. The, the other thing that became very important is for students to learn in the community. If they got credit for that, their motivation would be high. Prior to this policy, it was generally like, oh, engaging with society is a good thing, you should do, etc., etc. Well, some will do. It's not a bad thing to do. But for vast majority of students who have come to study and study courses which give them credits, unless there is credit, their motivation is muted. And so we argued, and this is now the policy. So community engagement now is credit based and it is university wide. And every faculty and discipline is expected to do that. In the last 2 years, specific directions and guidelines have been issued to all post-secondary institutions, all colleges and universities to begin to implement this. And for faculty members, it is entering in their performance assessment. So engaged teaching, engaged research is now entering in their annual or regular performance assessment. And more importantly, the National Accreditation and Assessment Council, which reviews and rates academic institutions, has now a category of community engagement. And the bullet points on that category are requiring them to demonstrate that their students and faculty engage in a mutually respectful manner. They don't go there and say, do this, do that. Or, for example, we will teach you how to learn computers. What are you teaching computers for? Have you had a conversation with the community before? Otherwise, the Accreditation Council will give you low marks. So now it's about 25% of the institutional accreditation comes on demonstrated engagement. And the methodology for community engagement is now formally accepted to be community-based participatory research. So last year, I visited one of the universities in Eastern India where they were practicing this for 3-4 years. and the Vice Chancellor was very excited. He said, "Sir, you will be very happy that we have shown in our presentation to the NAC assessment team, which came last week, a community engaged participatory research approach in several examples as our highlight, as our star innovation." And few weeks later, their accreditation ranking went up, and they're very happy. And so it's not that everywhere this change has happened, but it is beginning to happen. And we have argued with University Grants Commission that you have to build capacity of faculty members on their own. They'll not, and you will have to rebalance how much grading will be for writing journal articles and how much grading weightage will be there for community engagement, because you can't expect them to do all of that within the time that you have allotted. As we all know, engaged teaching in communities takes a lot more time and effort from the faculty members. And therefore, so in 2022, and then you see this book came out of that, this uh, 7 batches, um, nearly 300 faculty members were trained by us, a team led by me and a couple of my colleagues and one or two other resource persons, who gave a field-based training. So it's not just theory. It's okay, let's go to the village. Let's go to the informal settlement in the neighborhood and let's learn how to use methods and tools, but also how to listen to them about their knowledge, how to understand that. And more recently, in the last quarter, January to March, 5 more such programs were conducted. So now, on the whole, we have nearly 500 faculty members across the country. It's a very small number. We have 1.5 million faculty members. But in many colleges and universities now, this is beginning to take roots. In this program, the pedagogical design has been quite challenging for the faculty members, because when we talk about a field-based learning program and use of community-based participatory research, there is a element of not only learning new things, but also unlearning some. And one of the unlearning and most difficult unlearning for Indian academics has been that communities are also knowledgeable. That if you listen to them carefully and if you use local language and local idiom in your conversation, don't go there for collecting data, go there for having a conversation. You may actually learn what knowledge they have. And then you could build a more respectful partnership with them. So, field engagement has been a big change. 3 days in 5-day course, 6-day course, we take them to the field. We take them to the villages, we take them to slums, we take them to local institutions, local women's groups, local youth groups, local governance institutions, local schools, local health centers, local child care centers. And, a faculty member of civil engineering initially would say, "Oh, what do I have to do with all this?" But after a while, they recognize that your graduates of civil engineering will actually have to work in the real world. Not all of them will become academics, only 5-7% become academic. Rest of them have to go and either design or build a bridge or a highway or something, and that will be built in the real world. It will not be built inside the college campus. So you need to know who all you have to work with, whose land is being taken up to build the highway, what local government bodies exist, how they work, and you'll have to develop some capacity in local idioms. Local government leaders are not graduates and postgraduates of universities, but they are smart cookies. That's why they're elected as leaders. So you need to engage with them. A lot of them, local government leaders in India now, are women, nearly half of them in rural and urban areas. Now, how does a civil engineer go around talking to women about building a bridge or a highway? Because she has to nod her approval sometime during the process. So they have realized that preparing yourself in the real world, it a useful way of even a stepping stone for future career. So some of the lessons we have learned. One is that appreciation of local knowledge, community knowledge, not treating local communities as dumb or stupid or, you know, which, by the way, is, the arrogance of academic knowledge in our societies uh, is very widespread. Also, a shift away from sort of research on communities towards research with communities. Ask the question that they need to answer, find out how you can tap their expertise, etc. Because only then they will own the research findings and only then they will act on the improvement. Participatory methods, more and more people have learned participatory research in academia. Many of the students are learning. We are supporting them through additional online and face to face programs that PRIA does outside the government context. And the new ways of partnership are emerging. Partnership with local government, partnership with local vendors association, or management institutes, when they talk about management theory, much of it, and when they take their students for internship, they take them to the big corporate. 90% of India's economy is in the informal sector. Only 10% of the economy comes from organized 20 plus staff corporate sector. So if your management graduates don't know how to work with informal economy, how to work with and study the needs of a woman who is selling tea on the pavement outside, she is a smart entrepreneur. She does her own inventory analysis, she does her own pricing, she has analysis of demand, but she could benefit from the knowledge you have gained. But you don't see her as a internship opportunity. So this is beginning to change in some ways, and I think new ideas about engagement and partnership are emerging. Uh, just 2 days ago, in my meeting with the University Grants Commission, we have decided to hold a national conference. In India, the challenge is to develop this field. Lots of people are doing it. Lots of little bit of writings and blogs and this and that are there. But as a field, it has not yet developed. And I'm hoping there is a conference proposed early September, and that may begin to bring papers and presentations, and so gradually a sort of a there is emerging a network which PRIA supports very actively, but as a body of knowledge, as a field, so that next generation of students could do their PhDs on these examples and stories. That we are behind. That I have found in other countries like Malaysia or uh, South Africa more developed than in India, though it is happening in larger frequency in India, but not as a field. So hopefully in the next 4 or 5 years, that field will begin to emerge. And the other very interesting thing that is happening, there is a huge debate on colonial knowledge at the moment. You know, sociology in Delhi University, in the capital center, which is a 150-year-old university, Sociology in Delhi University has the same syllabus as sociology in a rural university in Northeast India. And students are beginning to question that. Uh, We, why can't curriculum be context oriented? Why cannot, why can't it reflect local contextual challenges as part of sociology, as part of any discipline? And so this grounded curriculum is is something that we are moving towards, but not yet have reached. Individual faculty members do, but what is approved by the deans of academic affairs or the internal councils, you know. So, a lot of, for example, students of architecture come to us and they want to study community housing, community uh, playgrounds, which are not built according to the modern architecture principle. But when they do that research, it is not given credit because the curriculum does not include this. It may include some methodology, but not the content. So while participatory research methodology is getting more acceptance, the knowledge produced from it getting inside the syllabus is resisted. So, so this is a debate that is going on, and I'm sure that this will follow up in coming years. I'm going to stop in a couple of minutes because I want to engage with you all. And um, but you know, I think the disconnect between society and academic institutions, community engagement is beginning to overcome that. We are bringing in greater conversation and therefore greater sense of partnership, overcoming that disconnect. Second is that many different forms of knowledges are getting recognized, valued, and they are being used in teaching and research. And thirdly, the content, the linguistic diversity, cultural diversity. So in the last 5, 6 years, as climate resilience is gaining ascendancy in academic and policy debates, climate has a very different meaning in indigenous communities. They say it is a spiritual part of our life. We worship trees and water bodies. So when you say be climate resilient, we have always been. You are the one who is bringing in problems of resilience. So this kind of a engagement is also sensitizing academic researchers in various domains. Public health. During COVID time, everybody, whether you are a PhD or you are illiterate, suddenly started using grandmother's herbal treatment. It gained acceptability. It was based on some herbs and all, but didn't matter. It didn't matter whether you had studied in Harvard or failed in your primary school. Didn't matter. Everybody, because COVID, you didn't know how immunity. How do you increase immunity? And so, food patterns, food habits, food from forests, food traditional um, herbal foods, etc. They began to gain more recognition in the minds of people, younger people. And now if you go to YouTube and all, you can find a lot of these things coming up. And so sensitization. Our grandparents had knowledge. Maybe it has not been certified in the current formal system. So we call this knowledge democracy, basically multiple diverse forms of knowledge getting acceptance and a little bit of sensitivity to cultural and linguistic diversity. क्योंकि community engagement has to be in local language. in India. You can't do it in English. There is no French anyway or Spanish. So if you can't engage in local languages, you can't do community engagement. Then you only do community engagement on your laptop. So let me stop here and you know, I all of you have a lot of experience and we can engage. I will share this. Mary has all this. Mary, you can circulate in the network, whoever wants, and we can give more material. That's not the problem. But I think, Anshuman, you can remove the slides. And thank you, Anshuman, for playing it because my internet was giving trouble. Now I can see all of you. Hello, Suzanne, and good evening.
So, Rajesh, we have a comment from Suzanne in the chat as she's part of an architecture school. So, I don't know if you want to follow up on that, either Rajesh or Suzanne.
Yes, yes.
And
Yes, indeed, indeed.
for those that may be watching later, Suzanne has just commented that Rajesh is absolutely right about students, that another aspect is the implementation portion and how they can partner to make their designs collaborative in communities so that the proposed designs can become reality. Lots of
That's a very
challenges.
good point, Susan. And I think we should. I know several people who are in the Faculty of Architecture and Design, but also who are practicing it on ground. In India, also, we have identical problem. Last time I was talking to these students in Northeast, they said, "Sir, we enjoy local knowledge. We are designing, but there are no takers for a job for us because the job we get after graduating are with architectural firms who get contract to build rich people's homes or high-rise institutional buildings in big cities. So after all, we have to earn a livelihood. So, so now we are trying to get the Ministry of Urban Planning and Housing to provide some support to local municipalities so that they can, like a postgraduate 2 year study come work kind of a model, because to change the whole thing will take 20 years. But in the meanwhile, if something small can start, where the graduates can come, a lot of labs are being done in the community during the study, but as soon as they finish, there's no job. There's no job. So you are very right about implementation. But this is a model we are thinking that we could give some sort of a government could fund, or some of the corporates could fund a sort of 2 year, post graduation, after you finish the your schooling, your studies, then you attach yourself to one municipality or even one NGO, or and and you earn your sort of a smaller pay but you do meaningful work and support local solutions.
That's great. And we have Jim with his hand up. So go ahead, Jim.
Thanks very much. Sorry, Mary, you were talking. I would just say that sometimes we see with our students that they actually know more than those architecture firms or design firms that are making the big dollars, particularly about the interaction with the public. So
Yeah,
I'll just call
you're
that
right.
out.
Yeah.
Thanks, Mary. Hi there, Rajesh.
Hi.
I'm Jim Waddell. I don't know if we've met. I think we've been on email exchanges, but
Yes, yes, yes.
so
Maybe
what?
on webinars, but not face to face.
Yeah. Thank you so much for being here and talking. Part of my background is having worked for a number of years at the Association of Public and Land Grant Universities.
Okay, okay.
And so I was in Washington, and a chunk of my job was lobbying and spending time doing advocacy kind of work on Capitol Hill and with the federal agencies, particularly the agencies that fund scientific research. And I'm fascinated by the impetus of the government policy, national policy that has really, it seems like, pushed forward the ability for institutions to really centralize, or not centralize, but center community engaged scholarship. And I don't think there was necessarily ever much hope for federal level attention to community engagement scholarship in this country, except through maybe the scientific funding agencies, broader impacts out of the National Science Foundation. That kind of
Right.
policy is a way to move toward that. But I don't think we would have ever seen, our Department of Education, now non-existent, promulgating kind of policies around that. So, and now, of course, we're in this different age, but I'm curious what your thoughts are about what can policymakers in this country learn from a place like India that has done this at a national level. I think there's actually a lot of work to be done. If we could find some way to put together the effort at the state level, I think there could be a lot done to help state, at least for the public, the state higher education institutions that I think there could be some level of policy directive around this, but that would take a big undertaking. We'd have to figure out how to create the organization that could do that, state by state kind of work. And or just rally the government affairs people at our state institutions to focus on this in their work. But so I'm just kind of curious your thoughts about, like, given the very different kind of governmental and just, and to a large extent political kind of context that we're in, what thoughts do you have about what we can do from a policy perspective in the US to push this work?
Well, you're right on. We have a peculiar contradiction. Sometimes, power, politics, and policies, you don't know which way they will go. We can analyze any policy, gender policy, digital policy, whatever. In this case, this is a national decision, not a provincial decision. Okay. Now they are trying to, so this national conference that has been decided 2 days ago, the heads of higher education at provinces are going to be invited for the first time, because we have a very complex higher education structure, partly because of the British colonial. So we have colleges. Colleges are affiliated. They're colleges with church relationship, colleges with Islamic, the Buddhist colleges. They all have to follow more or less the common curriculum, but they are different varieties. And some are standalone universities, but many universities have affiliated colleges because colleges don't have degree granting status. And one university could have 200 colleges. So you can imagine that many a times the colleges they're not quite like the college system in US, but they have grown locally. So they have a much better connect with local communities than big institutions, big universities, which were planted from somewhere. More or less similar to the process that land grant universities you had, which had community connect and because of their focus on agriculture and forestry and nutrition and all that. So some of the disciplines were pushing for this kind of a policy at the state level or provincial level, but now they have a handle. The other very interesting thing that we can use, Jim, in all countries, including in US, is the UNESCO declaration, UNESCO recommendation on open science. 2 weeks ago, I attended the annual meeting of Global Research Council. Global Research Council is a global network of national research councils, about 110 of them. This time, of course, there was nobody from US. Though the council was started with National Science Foundation's impetus and initiative historically. It's the 14th conference. They have been around 14, 15 years. The theme of the conference was, it was hosted by Thai Research Council, and there were people from all over. We went to present our findings from a decode case study on how community knowledge makes an impact on climate resilience. So we collected these case studies from around the world. We have been working on synthesizing them for the last 2.5 years. We got this opportunity to present it there. What was the theme of the conference? One was open science, and second was research for sustainable communities. Now, the open science discourse, particularly, it has 4 pillars, and the first 2 pillars are very common and popular knowledge: open access to data, open access to scientific infrastructure. The third pillar is open engagement with society, and the fourth pillar is open dialogue with multiple knowledge cultures. Third and fourth pillar, nobody pays attention. We are trying to grab that and push, because that's where community engagement is centered. And all our governments have signed that UNESCO recommendation. So the debate in Bangkok was fascinating. You could hear, the MENA region council people coming and saying, we need to tap into our indigenous community knowledge in the Arabic region. We are losing our language and culture and knowledge. So I think the policy push has to take this, these commitments our governments have made, knowingly or unknowingly, and rally those people around, and develop a mechanism for that. So I think opportunities are there, but we need the research funding community along with us.
Yeah, well, I think that, I think to some extent we have an understanding in the research funding community of the need for this. I think they sometimes interpret engagement differently.
Yeah.
Sometimes it's seen much more in a public service kind of format. For example, the National Science Foundation, you get a National Science Foundation grant. One of the 2 criteria that your grant is going to be judged on is, in addition to intellectual merit, it's going to be judged on broader impacts. And what happens is, a faculty member is writing a grant, and at the last minute they go, oh, we need something that speaks to broader impacts. And they run over to the local museum and they get their commitment to say, yes, you can do a couple of events here at the local museum, or they talk to somebody in the College of Education and they somehow, so they throw together a broader impact strategy rather than, but that's because the funding agencies do very little to sort of educate grantees about what it really means to do community engagement. And fortunately, we have some people, for example, we have an organization called ERIS, Research Impact, and that focuses on this. Mary knows that organization because it's based out of the University of Missouri. So there are people who are focused on it. It's just, so I think at the federal level, it's too heavy a lift. I think it would be a much more interesting effort for somebody to undertake, although again, it's sort of an impossible thing to imagine how to coordinate this, probably best done through the government affairs staff at universities, to give them tools for lobbying their their state level government to, use whatever levers it has, which are, I think, going to be much more influential in the end than the funding agencies, funding agencies. So anyway, thank you very much for thinking out loud with me about that, Rajesh.
No, but the bottom-up pressure is very important. The bottom-up pressure is happening in some provinces in India. Indigenous people are saying, well, this you are extracting our knowledge. We don't want to share with you. Where is the ethical protocol? Huh? You come collect our knowledge, collect our rituals, our ceremonies, our artifacts, and the public health programs. They're resisting immunization and collection of data without their knowing what is it being used for. We want good research, but be accountable. And I think these voices are coming up. I I I I think in some countries like New Zealand and Canada, and to some extent in I've seen examples in Colombia where the local indigenous communities are well organized to demand that research on their issues or their territory should be with them, not on them. And 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 research funders are shaped. So bottom up is it in the entire model of science shop in Netherlands emerged 30 years ago when local communities said, we want university to do research in our backyard. There is some smell coming, And they said, no, no, this is not the topic. Our master students are researching. And the movement began. And now all these universities have to have a interface mechanism in Netherlands and spreading in other countries. They call it science shop. So basically, any community organization, also local public institution, can knock on their door and say, we would like you to study this problem with us, allocate your experts to do this. And they are facing similar ranking in EU. So 10 years ago, European Union created a program which had lots of funding available for European universities on science with society. They had an earlier program called Science for Society, and then they altered that, transformed it after these kinds of. So I think there is potential, but as you said, some people have to push for this. It won't happen on its own, but it will happen sooner than later. Lou has a hand up.
Sorry, I was on mute.
Ah,
So really, really pleased that you're sharing your experiences and your knowledge with us this morning here, the evening in India. So in Indian universities, what are some of the areas of both resistance and support within academic departments for community engagement in teaching and research for faculty, including sociology? I'm a rural sociologist. So in what ways are faculty encouraged or discouraged in terms of their professional development to pursue community engagement in their curricula and research?
no, good. All changes go with resistance and potential for improvement. The initial set of resistances came from people who thought they had no need for society. So these are, accountants, people who are, in electrical engineering or engineering departments. Some of those who are in, nuclear physics, etc., etc. So they said, we have nothing to do with all this, which is fine. But linguistic, so somebody said, I teach English. What community engagement? So now, since the policy came in, now creativity is emerging. In one of the training programs I was doing, a professor of English asked this question. I said, let me give you one or two examples what your students can do in community engagement with you. Let them go around and engage with local business, very local business, local, transport, people who carry small buses and all, and understand how English is being used. Or go to a local skill training center and just hang around and say how English is being used, misused, is it helping, is it hindering? He thought that he should study, Shelley or some, some scholar in England. And I say, that's English. English is increasingly being used, misused, abused, whatever. In fact, then went back, and after 2, 3 months, he sent me a message saying, "Great idea. Our students have now collected photographs of peculiar uses of English in public spaces all around our university." And we are analyzing why this use. Why this use? What is the cultural factor here? You know, so, so, so I think there is one of the biggest resistance points, and that is understandable, is that the assessment criteria for teachers have not yet rebalanced the expectation of journal writing and community engagement, and that is a legitimate concern. So the other thing that is happening is that it increasingly, I'm sure American universities we have borrowed structure from discipline department, deans, etc., from the empire, so common empire. So that the biggest challenge right now is coming. Wonderful case studies are coming through engagement, because it's going on for many years now. For local language, local context, local, so sociology of in one of fisher folk community. And I heard that case study because in Marathi language, I don't know the language that well. I heard they presented in one of the training programs with little visuals and all. And they said they've been trying to get this included in the syllabus. And the committee of the deans, which meets once in a year, is yet to take this up. So he says, I'm in practice using it in my classes. Students love it. And in order to reduce the burden, I have taken a decision not to teach this set of material. That's okay. There's not. So this is, I mean, people who are interested, they are trying to find some ways. But if you are decentralizing development of curriculum, I know in US, Canada, I have also taught there some courses. I know that faculty members have the ability to design their curriculum and add or reduce reading materials or visuals or whatever. This here, very black and white and very rigidly controlled. One other thing that is coming up is that the story that in one of the training programs I was taking, I think Anshuman was with me also, taking a group of faculty members to a informal peri-urban community outside a big city, because the university hosting the program was in the city. So we went there. And some of the faculty members said, "Sir, we will ask them whether they would like to work with us." So I said, first you go there, understand what they do and how they do before you offer your services, pro bono or otherwise. So they started conversation. And towards the end, one of the professors asked one elderly man, was there, "So, sir, good discussion. Now we have to go. How can universities help you?" So he said, "Sir, we have problems. You have disciplines." The best statement on interdisciplinary, multidisciplinary, transdisciplinary.
Some of those same words, Rajesh, were used in in the Kellogg Commission reports that came out here in the US, like, what is that, 25 years ago now. And
Yeah,
I think that really helped a lot of people understand what the issue is that,
correct.
you know, communities have problems, universities have disciplines, and not ne'er shall the two meet.
So it made them think, that, you know.
So
So yeah,
thank
so those kinds of pressures are there, and also, a part of the higher education system has become uh, very, sort of mercenary. Let me put it this way, financially, and you know, people are preparing students to go to Harvard or wherever they can go, or all over the world. A special coaching is happening and all that kind of thing. So uh, there are those sort of diversions or obstacles, uh, you know, making money. They take students for a, European visit in summertime, and call it learning exposure visit or something like that.
you.
But it's a, but that apart, I think, not all 45 million students are doing that, but a small elite group is doing that. And but that tends to distort the context.
Well, thank you, Rajesh, and thank you for all of you who've engaged and brought up some wonderful questions. And it's a great the previous discussion was a great lead into um, the one virtual coffee hour we had about transdisciplinary work, and ACES is just about to release a research to practice piece on transdisciplinarity. So we're looking forward to that. Thank you again, Rajesh,
Thank
Anshuman,
you.
and your colleagues there in India.
Thank you very much. Thank you
Thank
all.
you. Thank you. It was
Wonderful to meet you and have a conversation. Good night.
Good night.
Thank you.